And we are preparing to stream the live meeting. KTLO episode, what episode? Say it with me. 37.
37.
37 episodes of this KTLO thing.
I almost
What
feel
is it?
grown up now.
What is it? Is it a webinar? No. Is it a training session? No.
No.
Is it a discussion among people who enjoy each other's company and respect each other's thoughts?
Give me a moment about that one. Yes.
Sort of. It's something like that. Anyway, but we're here every week and have been for, 36 previous times. So here we are on 37. Today's topic, same thing, only different. Yes, you've experienced it. You know what it's like. We're going to change everything. Everything's going to change tomorrow, so pay attention. And then next thing you know, it's the same thing, only in a different color, or the same thing, only in a different time of day, or the same thing. So we're going to talk about why that happens and what some of the issues are of that. And we'll just talk about change a lot. Change a lot. And change a lot. Anyway, that's a different play. Here we are again, Patty Blackstaff in Canada, out Western Canada. Greg Sanker in Oregon, not Oregon, which is how I learned to say it growing up in New Jersey. And Simone Jo Moore in France.
The only time I've been to Oregon was when I cooked with it.
Right. Okay. Moving right along.
You have a place to stay anytime you're anywhere near. That's not to everybody. That's to Simone and friends and family.
And then we also have some of the wonderful reappearing guests. NJ Robinson is here. Kathy Veldblum is here. And who knows who's going to pop in today. If you want to get a hold of any of the core crew, that's our Twitter handles there. We're also on LinkedIn. You can also go to the website, KTLOlearn.com, if you're a little confused about what this is about.
What is this thing, anyhow?
What is this thing?
The thing.
What we talk about? It's a thing.
Yes.
All right. It is the phrase is in my preferred phrase is in German. The thing itself. It's the thing itself. Das Ding an sich. That's the words I use to talk about the thing itself. And I think that fits in with today's discussion because sometimes the thing itself is the thing that doesn't get changed when we change the thing. Are you sufficiently confused now? Okay, good. We'll see if we can clear that up for you. Today's interviewer, or the interviewer du jour, so that Simone understands us, we have to put a little French in.
Murky bokies.
Good for you. Whatever that was. Just messy buckets. What? The interview du jour is Ms. Patty Blackstaff. So, Patty, I'm going to hand it over to you for some questions.
Well, we're on my favorite topic of all time, which is change. I've been delivering organizational change management and transformation work for over 15 years, and 13 of those, I've been so lucky to be able to go in and out of different client offices and have the opportunity to see really great change initiatives and some not so great. Every time I go in, I take a sign with me. It's a little wooden sign, and I always put it on my desk, and it says, "Don't be afraid of change. Be afraid of not changing." And there's a lot packed into that. And so I was really excited when I got to be the interviewer today because I am really looking forward to hearing all kinds of different perspectives on things we've seen, all of us, in our work lives and how change has been impacted and not impacted. And I love the title, Same but Different. Simone, when Greg first brought up the idea when we were talking about same but different for today's conversation, you said something. You said, it is ever thus. So how far back does the idea of the more things change, the more they stay?
Well, having moved to France and everything, and in the last 7 years, and widening my reading, I guess, but getting more into the French writers, in 1849, Jean-Baptiste Alphonse, he wrote, "Plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose." In other words, the more things change, the more they stay the same. So, I mean, when we think about that was in 1849, I thought, okay. So it's actually used as a colloquial term now when people go into work, oh, plus ça change, same thing, just anyway, it goes back much further than that, indeed. In some of my research and dissertations that I've written in the past, I thought, oh, I remember something. I think it was back in 2002, I wrote this thing for one of my diplomas, and it was the Meditations from Marcus Aurelius. So we're now talking 167 ACE after the Christian era. So what this says to me, that human beings are still engaged in many of the same thoughts and the same behaviors. So what's really changed? The context has changed. Our knowledge of the universe has changed. But, we still grapple with what it means for individuals to change. Paraphrasing Marcus Aurelius, because he can be a little bit formal in the way he says things. But really, when we observe what the thing is, there's our thing again, what the thing is, that actually produces an appearance of something. And when we have an appearance of something, we then sort of divide it into, is this a formal thing? Is this a material thing? What's the purpose of this thing? And at what time does this thing end? And for you guys, the episode at the top of the next hour.
So basically what you're saying is what stays the same? The human condition. I mean, we're still approaching life and work and the things that we walk into in much the same way. Some of us more evolved, some of us slightly less evolved, maybe. Greg, I think we've all seen instances where leaders will jump on an idea and suddenly everything seems to shift, and yet nothing really moves. So why do you think that is?
I love when that happens because my heart goes out to it. It's like, and when you've been around a bit, you can almost identify specifically what leadership book they bought at the airport on their way back from a business trip, because it's all about, we're going to shine, or we're going to empower, whatever the thing is. And I mean that sincerely, actually. I don't have a cynicism about that, because it means they truly want to do something. They saw something that resonated with them and that got excited about it. It's like, if only my office could be more like this. But what they didn't do is really consider the enormity of the task of changing a culture to embrace those ideas and what it means for them personally as a leader and the level of dedication. So it's like, I don't greet that with cynicism. It just makes my heart happy. I came across a quote that I had never seen this before. It's from T.S. Eliot, or at least it's attributed to him, that says, "Nothing pleases people more than to go on thinking what they've always thought, and at the same time imagine that they are thinking something new and daring. It combines the advantage of security and the delight of adventure." And I think a lot of us do that. We don't want to change our own thinking. We don't want to change fundamentally. We just want to feel like we're doing something new and exciting and different. And I think that really kind of sets the stage that we talk a lot about digital leadership and what it takes to transform a culture. And it is much more fundamental of that. And it requires a deeper level of vulnerability and kind of openness to change. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, I think my experience with change has always been that exactly what you said. So there is this willingness to collect change evidence that supports our current belief system.
That is right on.
Yeah, I really like
desire belief, and so we go gather evidence to prove that, right?
Right, and I really love that quote by Albert Einstein, who I felt, as brilliant as he was, also held humility in the understanding of being able to learn from his mistakes and being able to experiment, right? And he always said the measure of intelligence is the ability to change. And that quote really is steadfast in a lot of the materials that I use when I'm working with clients. So basically, change isn't FOMO and fad hopping. I think, Roy, I'm going to shift over to you because I want to ask you a little something about the morale and employee engagement. What's the impact on morale and employee engagement when a change kind of turns out to have very little impact on the organization?
Well, what happens is that people become more lackadaisical about change. They become more skeptical about change. They become more cynical about change. When an announced change turns into more of the same, only different, different. Let's slap another nameplate on it, and we'll keep doing everything the same way. So next time around, that enthusiastic leader that Greg talked about, who's really sincere in their belief that they want to make a change, comes in and says, "We're going to do this," and the employees go, "Yeah, right. Sure we are. Okay, we'll humor you," and then nothing will happen. And too often that's exactly what happens. It lets the air out of the organizational balloon, as it were, right? It just deflates everything. Morale goes down, engagement goes down when changes fail or when changes turn out to be more of the same. And that is extremely unfortunate and makes life difficult down the road.
Yeah, I think there's a separation of willingness to understand that employee experience isn't a new thing. That and it doesn't replace engagement, but they work together, and that's something I've learned from Jacob Morgan, who is in the leadership. But
So are you saying it's the same thing, only different, Patty? Is that what you're
well, not really, but but transformation is a tricky thing, and a lot of what we are trying to achieve is getting better at something. But Greg, sources say about 70 to 80% of digital transformations fail. Why do you think that is?
Well, first of all, is like I've seen numbers anywhere from greater than 50, 60, 70, 80, maybe 90% of digital transformations fail or fail to produce the desired results or the value that people anticipated. It's like, think about that for a second. That is massive. Would anybody put money down on those odds? Think of the hundreds of billions of dollars that organizations are spending to digitally transform, and it's not producing the value. So why do we keep investing in that? What is it? Because everybody else is doing it? Is it because the cool kids are transforming, or because we really actually believe that there's value in it and really, really want? I mean, it's an amazing thing, right? So why do they fail? Here's the thing: because we focus on the wrong things. I think so often we think of transformation as we're using new technology. We're moving to the cloud. We're adopting, Google Docs or Microsoft 365, and that's going to change everything. And I was like, it doesn't change anything. Those are tools. What we don't focus on often enough is the cultural transformation, the need for systematic change in how we do things. And that includes everything from onboarding and our policies and our programs and HR and our physical space and how we manage people and how we empower and trust people, as opposed to micromanage. I mean, it's everything. And those things don't often get taken into account. I mean, how often is digital transformation? Well, that's digital, that's CIO, right? So transform us. It's like, that's the last thing. I mean, technology is part of it, but technology is connected with whatever it is that we're fundamentally changing at a deeper level. And so to me, that's why we fail, because we're focusing on the wrong things. We're not focusing on the things that are difficult. And frankly, the reason we don't focus on it, those are hard. It's like political candidates. They don't take on the problems that they can't solve in their term, right? In 4 years. Right. So they're going to choose to take on something that they can show that we've fundamentally changed everything, in a month or 2 months or a year. Right. And leaders do the same thing. It's like, if I can't produce results that I can sell in the next quarter or this fiscal year, I'm out of here, or I'm not demonstrating value. And cultural transformation is one of those, it takes a long time and a tremendous amount of dedication over the long haul.
Yeah, Greg, sorry, Patty, I was just thinking about what Greg said about the books that leaders read, and also what's happening here, how much money we sink into something. We don't want to admit we're wrong, right? We that's just something we don't want to do. Our ego won't let us do it. But there's a science joke that we use quite a lot. My amygdala can beat up your prefrontal cortex anytime. So, because we can only tap into what we've read, what we know, what our I guess the size of our vocabulary is actually is based on how much we know. So I think that's part of what you were talking about.
I would agree when you're trying to manage something at the top, right? When you're trying to manage it from the top. But the beauty of being able to understand that we have this opportunity with solar structures and really fundamentally changing how we gather feedback and organizational information so that we aren't left with just our own vocabulary, but that we begin to expand that. When Greg was talking, it was interesting because I kept seeing NJ nodding. He was like, oh yeah, oh yeah. Share a little bit about transformation from your angle, NJ.
Thank you very much. So when I was listening to Greg, he really hit the nail on the head. Like change doesn't happen in its own little silo. You have to take into consideration strategy, lumped in with culture, lumped in with leadership, and a neglect on either of those pillars, if you will inevitably fail change, especially culture. Culture is such a beast to tackle. And I don't think, and it's because it's like, it's nothing you can necessarily measure. It's ingrained in us. And so trying to create culture change is such a hard job to do. And I think a lot of times in relation to culture, change fails because they don't account for how long it takes to change culture. And the necessity to really communicate the need to change and such. And so I think you have, we deployed this IT tool. Great, we've changed. No, because you still have those same underlying behaviors, attitudes, and the culture norms that haven't caught up to what the tool is or whatever. So.
Yeah, it's anytime I've been involved in a large transformation, that's my role. That's the role I've been doing for the last 13 years. I can honestly tell a leader that's going to take 18 months to get behavior to change around the tool, but it's going to take 5 years to change your culture. Greg, I'm going to move you over because you're like waving your hands like, yay, I want to jump on this.
So NJ, I was like, he and I are going to have to spin up a meeting afterwards because it's like you're so connected with what I'm seeing. Clearly, you've seen some of the challenges we face. Here's where I think one of the complicating factors is leaders talk about what we want to do. They talk about the need for change, but then they don't model it. And people are pretty smart, right? You say, we're going to start behaving like this. We're going to start doing this. And then there's an announcement of the new corporate program that's going to micromanage everybody or whatever. It's like, so how do those wash? And people respond to the actual messages that they see, not the audible messages, not the one, hey, do as I say, not as I do. And I think that really complicates it when leaders are not first and foremost modeling what it is that they.
I can't believe you just said that. That's exactly what my father used to say to me all this time. Do as I say, not as I do. That was his excuse for everything that he was allowed to do it and we weren't. So imagine that your boss has that kind of power over you or over the team, and they can do where they will, but oh no, you have to follow the rules. Wait, when you get here, then you don't have to follow the rules. How confusing is that?
Yeah, the old membership has its privileges. Oh, well, I don't have to do that because I'm in the C-suite or whatever.
Hey, Roy, chime in here.
I was speaking to a different group a few days ago, and one of the things I talked about was policies, and don't make policies that you can't abide by. If you're a leader and you're overseeing the policies that are going and procedures that are going to help your group or your organization as a whole, depending on where you are, where you sit. Then make them something you can live by. And I think I said something like, don't make a rule that you can only use the restroom for 2 minutes once every 24 hours, because nobody can live with that, right? But those rules exist in real companies. I mean, those rules are out there, or something very similar to them. Contact centers, 3-minute bathroom break in the morning, 3-minute bathroom break in the afternoon. Are you going to tell me that somebody who sits in the C-suite is going to do that? No, they're not. So make the policies livable by everybody in the organization. Make them human. We're people. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I think that, when we talk about, and we've done this many, many times, we talk about what we tolerate, we propagate. But what we tolerate has to be tolerable at all levels, right? So very, very much we need to make it human. But there's some underlying stuff here that is necessary. So when it comes to resilience and communications in an ever-changing world, Simone brings up an expression, or I don't know, would you call it a title, an expression, an assignment, a category? But she uses
actually a real thing.
Yeah, she uses the word resilient dissent. What does that mean?
See, it's so funny. I started to have an emotional hijack the second Greg said that phrase, because I was thrown back to childhood with my father. I couldn't help it. And I tell you what, and after that, that's where I started understanding what resilient dissent was actually about. And also then after my time in the military, because that is so structured in terms of rules around each part of the hierarchy and how things move and so on and so forth. And there are, let's say, maneuvers that one makes to express resilient dissent in certain ways. Really what it's about is adversarial collaboration. It's part of it started off in science, where it's a term that's used when two or more people, they have opposing views, that they have to work together. And sometimes that can be because they want to test each other's hypothesis and prove the other one wrong, or prove the other, that kind of stuff. But it goes from mild to extreme band on how this happens. But really, it's a shift in the dynamics of energy within the team or between those people that have those differing views. And we can only enable change if the approach or the mechanism and so on actually allows first for us to have insight. We have to allow insight to take place. That's like in widening our vocabulary, our experience and stuff like that. Because if we don't allow that space first, then the process of shifting can't move forward. It becomes very contextual. So if we want to change based on our opinion or experience and such like, that's great, but it's really still about what we believe is still true. So if we don't have that insight, if it doesn't feel like there's an enhancement to my well-being or to what I understand and what I know, if it's not felt like an enhancement, well, I'll tell you what, there's pretty little, verve for actually wanting to participate or engage in that change.
I agree. How we prepare and support people really matters, but there's a lot of underlying things within a culture that we really need to address, such as conflict, what people would consider resistance. I don't buy into the resistance model. I really believe it's about response. And the people I celebrate, so there's an expression I always use when I'm doing a change or a transformation project with an organization, and that's positive deviant. So anyone who's capable of deviating from the script or the culture script and is willing to address conflict, you have to celebrate those people, because they're the people who will call out the elephant in the room, right? They're the ones who will say, yeah, but we're not going to take this offline. We're actually going to address it here and we're going to deal with it well. Right?
They are our resilient dissenters.
Yes,
there you go.
Yes, or the positive deviant, exactly. So, Roy, how can the cycle of change, but new change, be broken?
I think the study of how habits are formed and broken is really important here. because ultimately, I mean, we do the same thing every day. We go to work every day. We do the same tasks or the same types of tasks, and we use the same tools every day. We have formed habits with them. So in order to change the way we do things and the way we think about things, because all of those tasks and all the way we do things shapes our thoughts about them. And so we need to break those habits and form new ones. And that's really difficult to do, right? Habits are hard to break and habits are equally hard to form. I'm gonna start off every day on the treadmill for a half an hour. And you get up the next day and you do the treadmill, and the next day you do maybe not. So you have to do it repetitively, and you have to break the habits that you want to break. And part of the problem is that a lot of times change involves habits that are good. There's nothing wrong with the habits. You just need to change them, to break them, to move on to something else. And that's a tough thing to do. So the study of habits is a really good place to start.
Yeah, I think there's so much value in being able to work with the change group and then go out and get the engagement on what's really working, what's working now, what can we do to enhance it to bring us forward. Kathy, I'm going to flip over to you because you're a very great communicator as a leader, and you're passionate about this topic.
Yes, and I come at it, of course, I'm always thinking about the team. Unfortunately, I get a little tunnel vision. Every time we start talking, I think about the team. And I think about when we make change and if we're not communicating early, or do we need to get champions for this and get them on board? Do we need to campaign and advertise throughout the company? Because if we don't approach this very thoughtfully, before going forward with the change with our employees, they can get bitter if they don't understand it. And if that repeats itself, that bitterness can turn into toxicity in culture. And maybe that's something exactly what you were trying to make a positive change to improve culture can backfire.
Yeah, I agree. I've seen in companies where they have repeatedly beat people up with multiple changes that didn't do anything and didn't amount to anything, but it did absolutely diminish their ability to perform, and that builds resentment. And resentment is the one largest toxic culture piece that is almost impossible to break through. I think that we're
and toxicity is contagious.
Yes, it is. Absolutely, it is. We talk about, there's 3 levels I learned from Leanne Davey. She says there's the wise, the witness, and the wounded. Mm-hmm. And we have to address all 3 when we're dealing, because really pushing change on people is conflict, right? And so we have to avoid the push and really support. But we've seen lots of fads in leadership methods and approaches over the years. What's going on when it comes to lining those up with success rates? Greg, I'm going to pick on you.
Pick on me, right? Because I'm the old one that's been around long enough that has seen these things. It is kind of funny, you've been around long enough, you start seeing like trends in how we do things. We have quality circles, we have self-organizing teams, we have TQCM, we have Lean Six Sigma, and there's hundreds. These are just the ones that come to mind. And the interesting thing is, when you've been around long enough, you see like the rise and fall of the elements. It's just we give them new names, a new lexicon, a new way of talking, and we act like it's a brand new idea. I've also learned, this is a freebie here, right? You can email me and I'll give you a right to use this, right? It doesn't do any good to be the guy that goes, we did this before. It's just that we used to call it blah, blah, blah. It does nothing. It turns people off. But the upshot of that is we tend to operate at the method level or the framework level, and not at the underlying elements that are true in these things. And because we don't deal with those underlying issues or the underlying elements, we never get to the real heart of the matter. So think of it like this. right? I'm planting flowers, and every year I go out and I plant flowers, and a month or so later they die. And I was like, dang. I was like, so I'm watering them, I'm fertilizing them, I'm researching. I go out every year in the hopes that this time it's going to really, really work. And I plant them, and I find out that they just, no matter what I do, they just seem to actually just die, right? That's the flowers. But if we were to dig deep into the flower bed, down just below the surface, there's this concrete layer. This is my example, so I can make it up, right? There's this concrete layer. When the roots go down and hit on that, no matter what you do at the surface level, they don't grow. They can't grow. And that's what we do in organizations. If you don't dig down deep enough to get to the core essential elements, no matter what you call it, no matter what the latest fad or the approach that's going to change everything, it's not going to work, because you're not dealing with the underlying fundamentals that are necessary for growth and new life and new change within your organization. And I think that's where we're getting it wrong. It's not that any method or approach is fundamentally flawed. It's just that we don't dig deep enough with it.
I agree. Absolutely. And Hilary Mantel wrote in Wolf Hall, some of these things are true and some of them are lies, but they're all good stories. So when we go in and we're doing a change or transformation piece, we start doing our interviews and we start learning from people and we hear about their personal experience, and some of these things are true and some of them are lies. And it's up to us through the change process to peel away the onion. Simone is good at peeling away the onion. She likes to dig in. Simone, tell us a little bit about how we can dig a little deeper in some of the fundamental pieces in that. And I know I'm throwing you off here, but you're good at this.
Actually, I'll just pick up on something that Greg was saying too in here. And there's a very old phrase that a lot of people will still know, that when we actually look at something, it has already changed in its nature, because there's a different perspective on it already. That a constant observance, I think, is a very important facet. The universe does like to play its jokes on us. It loves nothing so much as to change the things which are, and then to make new things like them. That's another one from Marcus Aurelius. So we are, even then, see, we're back to 167 ACE again. This is how far back it goes. But for everything that exists in some manner, is actually the seed of what has gone before and what is possible or could be. I've got this beautiful garden behind me. That's my autumnal winter garden at the moment. And when you think about it, people graft things together to create a new variety. So we know that can actually occur. The past and present can actually mingle. So new practices do develop from the old. Our understanding can grow, our perceptions can change, and they do change by actually looking at those things. So, society experiences the new, and therefore the individual does as well. I guess it is about opinion, about the history that's been shown to us. Patterns do repeat. But what appears as different is sometimes the same, just in a different light. And in that observance, we are able to shift the way in which we interact with it. And that in itself causes a change.
Yeah, I think, and I think if we're going to get closer to the truth, we need to do that by being a little unconventional. So Roy, what are some of the unconventional ways organizations can start to break out of the change but no change cycle?
Well, I think one of the things that organizations do that's very conventional is, as we were discussing before, everybody changes except the leadership, right? And they maintain and keep doing things the same way the way that they want to do it, and disregard the change that supposedly they're endorsing. We talked many episodes ago about the difference between commitment and involvement, and how the old bacon and egg for breakfast story, which is the pig was committed, the chicken was involved. I think leaders have to be committed to this. They really have to say, okay, this is where we want to go. And that's the key thing, is have that vision, pick a direction, pick the goal that you want to achieve, and remain focused and committed to that. And what unfortunately happens a lot of the time is that we say we're going to change, and you people who are involved in change, you go fix that. Somebody else's job. It's not my job. It's your job to fix it or change it. And that's a problem. That's a real problem. You have to have leadership commitment. That's the probably the biggest thing that organizations can start doing, is make sure that their leaders understand that where they go, the organization will follow, but they have to go there. If they're not going there, the organization is not going to move.
Yeah, there's something that we do when we work with the executives and the sponsorship and the steering committee. We talk about how important it is that they understand they can be active, involved, right? Or they can really be a part of the change. And when they're a part of the change, when people see the leader changing, that shifts things. When they see that commitment. NJ, I'm going to jump into you because you've been doing a lot of nodding.
I really love this subject. I just really do. And so I was listening to Roy, and some of the things I've seen where strategic initiatives have failed, strategic initiatives have failed because of poor leadership buy-in. And not even just positional leaders. You also have leaders at their various levels in organization that don't have a title, but they have influence. And so for me, when I define leadership, I use Maxwell's simplification of it as leadership is influence, pure and simple. And so if you don't have those key influencers buying in and modeling the culture and adopting the technology or the process of whatever it is that you're trying to change, it is doomed to fail. And so it's really going to key on that. There's one more thing I want to say. It's kind of piggyback on Greg earlier, and it's something at a team level. So we've had to flex a lot during this COVID with my different teams and such. And so I have been very understanding of measuring the temperature of change, if you will, being very cognizant of, is this a moment where we need to introduce another change? Because the team has been through so much already. And I think you have those superheroes who come back from the conference. I've done it myself. Say, hey, let's do this, and not really take in consideration where this initiative fits within the history of the organization. And are we just coming out of the change initiative? Are we in another change initiative? And so timing is very important when we're talking about wanting to put forth a change as well.
Oh, I love that. And Jade, there is, when you talk about change too, you have to really consider collision. So when we're making those decisions, what are all the collisions that are going to occur throughout the organization when it comes to multiple changes? And what does that heat map look like? I'm going to tap in though to your influence comment, because what is a leader? It's someone who can influence others. But we mistake who those people are in our organization. There was one time I was doing a training course, and this fellow walks in, and you could tell that at the beginning of the course, every eye was on him, and he was not receptive, but he was not in any way someone with a title. He was someone with influence. And there were 20 people in the room. He walked in big, burly, I'm not going to buy into this. And it was a manufacturing company, and he was on the floor, and he was one of those people that everyone looked up to. And so we took a few minutes to talk about, I did the introduction, everything. And then in that morning 15-minute break, broke away with him and had a little chat and asked, so what's the roadblock here? Like, what's going on? Why don't you and I chat a little bit? And by the end of our 15-minute talk, we were able to go back to the training class. And at noon, he said to everyone, well, this is pretty cool. And it completely flipped the entire room. So influence isn't necessarily the people you believe it is, right? And I think that's something we need to look at within our organizations, those positive deviants, but also the people that just carry weight by how their body language tells the rest of the organization whether they're accepting this, right? and there's ways to move people through. Simone, what can be done so people can really trust the process?
I love it when we're so in sync. As you were talking about that, I was actually thinking of exactly that, trusting the process of what's happening with this. Your questioning skills. I think people's questioning skills are really vital to opening up conversation, not just for clarifying, with the people that, as part of the communication process, but also, and the actions that are being taken. But I think what it does as well, it really deepens the conversation if we can have that curiosity. That's one of the things that an Albert Einstein one, to come back to the beginning, I'm not necessarily clever, but I'm incredibly curious. And that curiosity and attentiveness, again, it comes back to that observance, really then gives me clues, by asking those questions from people that can deepen that conversation. And we really do it only takes one voice to have that dissent or that different perspective to be heard. And then we can create that adversarial collaboration. That's my way of looking at, the word dissent is often taken negatively, but if we look at it more as adversarial collaboration, that brings a completely different light, because the conversation is dynamic, it shifts, it splits, it takes you into new areas and hidden insights, which is that first opening up of how we can see something different. And I think part of a really critical thing is making sure we put that influence, those relationships, into context that you were talking about, where that sits, where those people fit in our nexus of relationships. And we need to be comfortable with the uncertainty. And the reason for that is to be able to create the right level of chaos, if you like, to open up those possibilities so that we can discover what exists and what kind of potential we might realize, how we can engender that collaboration.
Oh, I love that. I love that. There is, we earn trust, right? Honestly, trust isn't something that, oh, I have a title, you must trust me. Trust me, I'm a doctor. This isn't something that just comes naturally to people. I think it's really important to recognize this ability to reach out, but there's lots of prep. And I think where we fail many times, and Greg alluded to it, is that we don't do the preparation involved, that upfront understanding of the impact this change is going to have on the human condition within the organization. Kathy, I'm just wondering what your thoughts are. You've been zipping in and out because of connectivity, so we'll cross our fingers here.
Yes, and I'm going to listen to the replay because I know that there's always so much information going on. The thing that comes to mind with what you're just speaking about, Patty, is, having a leadership team that's engaged and understands and wants to understand their employee base at large, and one that is disconnected, because by being engaged, that's as I see it, the only way to go about doing the right research, not just we were talking about back at the beginning, research that validates what we want to think. And it's knowing who the right players are within the organization. You were talking about, Patty, the influencers, and really, my words are gone. But I think,
yeah, I hear what you're saying though. We worked with a group of folks in one of the major changes we were doing, and we put together a focus group of who we thought were the influencers, and we learned they weren't the influencers we thought they were. And so being willing to shift and change through the change, understanding at the beginning that decision-making rights for the change are going to be different than decision-making rights for the operation, and really building that plan and working that out, right? I think that's important. We can't we can't see ourselves. Organizations are poor at seeing themselves, seeing their culture, the way it is viewed from someone on the outside objectively. And I think there's so much value, and I'm not just pushing this because I'm a consultant like hire me, but it really is true. How someone else sees your organization is something that's really key to paying attention to on an observation side. You know, Roy, I want to tap into some of your background too, because observation in employee and customer experience is really key, because I don't think we see how our employees see us or the organization.
That's absolutely true. And the word that's used for that observation is quality assurance. Generally speaking, you either double jack with somebody and listen to the phone call that they're on, or you listen to a recording of that particular interaction, or you read back through the. I think that most of us who have spent any time managing either in a contact center or at a service desk have spent a very long time reading through tickets and looking at the comments and listening to what the customer interaction was like. And so we have to observe those interactions in order to better understand what is the image of our organization that's being projected. How do our customers perceive us? And that's where the rubber meets the road, is at that customer contact center or that service desk. That is where really what our organization represents is brought out in the full light of day. And it's interesting that the observer effect in physics was brought up a little bit earlier, but we change something by observing it. And the reason for that is that in order to see a particle, you have to have light on the subject, which means it has to interact with the photon. And once the photon interacts with that subatomic particle, you've changed its direction or you've changed its speed. Thank you, Dr. Heisenberg. And the next words Heisenberg once said to a police officer, "Yes, I know how fast I was going, but I have no idea where I am." In any event, you need to step in from outside. And I was thinking that as you were talking earlier about organizations not seeing themselves very well, and that's one of the good reasons to bring somebody periodically in from outside and have a look, just review, you know?
Sure. I think that, you know, when you look at observation and you consider the OODA loop, so observation also includes orient, right? And then decision. And then it's about really analyzing all of that and coming back to the front and re-observing again. And sometimes we have a hard time doing that if we're doing it from the side of our desk. Greg, I'm going to pop into you and ask a little bit about excellence. So when we're talking about transformation, if you were in a company and you were leading a transformation, what would you say are the keys to getting toward excellence?
I thought there was some irony. Greg, let's talk about excellence, because you really struggle with that. Here's the thing, in organizations, here's a fundamental. People rise to the level of expectation. If leadership, if management, if you individually truly believe that left to their own devices, people will be lazy and unproductive and do all the wrong things and try to lie, cheat, and steal and get away with stuff, then it won't surprise you that you're going to see that behavior. But if you truly believe that people want to do the right things, and given the right opportunity, the right circumstance, the right situation, the right resources, that they're going to do great things, is stand back, because you're going to see a team that does excellent things. And I think that we're in a pivot moment between the former and the latter. It's like management is really struggling right now. You know, modern methodologies, and I see that Akshay just joined us, and I should probably put him on the spot here, but there's not a lot of context. Hey, Akshay. But older methodologies of managing people really worked when your job was to produce 28 widgets before lunch, right? And if you produce 26, well, you're not doing your job. Get on with it. Let's get this thing going, right? And really not a lot of understanding around the context or the constraints or the circumstances around that employee, because frankly, we don't care. Produce your widgets or get out and we'll get somebody in here who does. But in a modern context, and it's not just that we think differently, it's that the nature of the work is fundamentally different now. And it requires people to show up, to be authentic, to bring their whole self. They got to think, they've got to be innovative. And furthermore, it's not an individual activity. It's, I don't know everything there is to know. So I can't, regardless of what resources are provided to me, I can't figure it out. It's me and Roy and you guys in conversation, figuring it out. You bring different perspectives and I have to learn how to work with you. And so if we empower people to do that, that's where cool things happen. And you see organizations that are building those kind of cultures, they're incredibly successful. And organizations that are still really feeling like we should probably just put more controls on people, they're struggling right now.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there's so much to be said about having moved from task-oriented organizations into places where we really need co-creation. So actually, you've just joined us. So I don't know how much of this you've heard, but welcome. And did you want to pipe in?
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, first of all, Greg. Apologies. I don't know if you cleared that with the rest of you, but I'll do my best to behave.
I invited you not to behave.
Come on, Akshay, I know you better than that. I mean, you know, with a title like The Axeman Cometh, I mean, seriously, behave.
Going back to what Greg said, I agree with a lot of what he said, and there's also a lot that I disagree with. I think there's a danger here, as we do with a lot of other things, to apply a broad brushstroke, treat people in a monolithic fashion. There are some people who like to have that predictability, who thrive with predictability, and we need to recognize that. And as managers, we need to find them the type of work that will keep them happy and add value to the business and to the ecosystem in general. Equally, there are people who thrive in uncertainty, and we need to find them the right place to play as well. You know, when I first started working, I had a really great mentor, my manager at the time, who told me, look, actually, there are two types of. This was a consulting company, and I was working with Remedy, and I was working with developers, with consultants, etc. And he said, look, actually, there are two types of people that you're going to encounter. They're the consultants to whom you can say, I want you to do X, and they can go out and figure it out, right? You don't have to give them more than what the outcome needs to be. And I apologize for what I'm about to say next, because he said, and then there's the developers for whom you have to spell out exactly what you want to see. And they will go out and figure out a way to give you exactly what you've asked for. The consultant might not ask you, give you what you asked for. They'll give you an approximation based on their biases, how they've interpreted the message, but roughly they'll land in the same ballpark. But the developer type of personality is going to want to have a bit more specification around what you want to see. Now, I know, again, gross generalizations, and I just said we shouldn't be generalizing things, but I'm at least generalizing with two types of generalizations. Greg, you were just generalizing with one.
Okay, so, but you know what? That's real, though. That's so real. There are people who, and we find this in any change or transformation that we're leading. There are people who just tell me what to do. Just tell me what to do. I don't want to think about this. Like, just give me the task, give me the steps, and lead me forward. Simone, you are, I'm just gonna tap into you for a minute. You are all about humanizing IT. And I think there's something that's underlying here, and that's emotional intelligence and resilience. Those two things that you've been focusing on in the last couple of years. And I'd love you to just wrap up a little bit because we're running close to time.
Oh, okay. So let me actually just tap very quickly into something that is called flow science. So it incorporates both emotional intelligence. I love emotional agility. There's a lot of things that we can cover there, as we know. I just want to talk about that state of flow when people, you were saying there are some, and I can be the same. There are certain times, really, I don't want to think. Can I just tap into what I know how to do and do it? So I'm in the zone. This is our flow zone. This is, I just want to do what I want to do. And this is a state where the person who's performing the activity is fully immersed in experiencing that feeling of being energized and focused completely in what they do. And that's where they find their enjoyment. And I think that's where, this is part of where actually comes from too, because if that's where they find their enjoyment, then let's tap into that. Let's get them into the zone. And that's very important because it impacts that, I guess, the happiness quotient, the employee experience quotient that makes a difference to productivity. And we can change that. I mean, with neuroscience, we know that the flow is affected by our wiring. I'm going to keep it really light because I know we're running out of time here. So the point here, though, is that energy flows where attention goes, and our emotions actually control that flow.
Yeah, I think it's important to understand where emotion goes. We are running up on time. I'm just going to finish with kind of, and the team is used to me doing this because I listen throughout the entire thing and then I say, this is what I think this amounts to. Basically, I think what I heard today is that organizations need an open-minded capacity to see transformation from a systems thinking approach, that there has to be an active, committed leadership. So what that boils down to is we can't delegate transformation. We have to look at the constituent parts, how they interrelate, how the systems have worked over time, what the impact is going to be, even in the smaller pockets, and then analyze it in the context of the larger system. And I really believe that we have big work to do, and we always underestimate what it will involve in order to truly transform. Because like Greg said, you can't just add a tool. And I flip over to Roy because we've got 1 minute left. Thank you everyone for your input today.
1 minute left, 1 minute left. Oh, sorry. I was feeling a time constraint there. Great conversation today. Thank you everybody for contributing to that. I'm going to just throw this out there too, and perhaps we'll discuss this in a future episode. We're talking about, breaking habits and using non-preconceived methods of maybe achieving the change we want to. We talked a little bit about the influence may not be who you think they are. The influencers are different. I'm going to throw this out too. The communication channels might not be what you think they are. It's unfortunate that we've become constrained by, we're going to send it out to this email distro or this team on Microsoft Teams or this group that's on Slack. Unfortunately, what you miss is that the non-standard methods of communication. And just a quick illustration was when the CIO, where I was working, when the CIO announced that there were going to be layoffs in IT, and then he left the building immediately following that statement, walked to the door, which was 40 feet away, went down a flight of steps across a parking lot into another building, into another meeting room. The people there knew what he had announced before he got in the room. So how did that happen? Well, it's because the receptionist picked up the phone and called her friend who worked over in that building and said, hey, he just announced there are going to be layoffs. And the word was spread by the grapevine. Unconventional methods. Let's look at some of those as we go too. So we've had a great conversation today on the subject of same thing, but not. And we will be back again next time here on KTLO, keeping the learning on. Point in some direction. It doesn't matter which. Okay.
Isn't that where we have to talk all at once, though, to see it?
Yeah, no.